Doc on the Run. We help injured runners run.
Should I run if my soreness goes away? So, if I take a day or two off and I feel better, and then should I do those last few workouts, jam them in just to feel better about it, feel like I have more confidence, more prepared, I'll be better off. Should I do that? Maybe just in a shorter form, a shorter workout, not maybe 18 miles, but maybe 15 miles, maybe not doing 7 or 6 mile runs all next week, but just doing 2 or 3 miles or 4 miles next week. So, all right, for just a second, why don't we just suspend the whole premise and an idea about considering your injury risk in terms of making your injury worse or more severe. Instead, for a second, let's just think about this scenario and how these things, whether you run or don't run, how it increases your probability of actually finishing the race and achieving your goal. Because if you think about that, it simplifies things a lot. Again, David Goggins had stress fractures and went to doctor. They said, well, you can't do Badwater, or you can't do this, you can't do Ultraman, you can't do any of these races with stress fractures in your feet. But I think Goggins would just Goggins up and do it because that's what he does. So, if you say I have a new pain and I have a marathon in 10 days and I just want to finish my marathon, I want to get my t-shirt, say that I did it, and I want to go back to my normal workout routine of running, 4 or 5 days a week. That's very different than if you say, well, I plan on just finishing the marathon because it's a training run for me, and then I want to start ramping up for Ironman Texas in 3 months, right? If you think about these, you have to think about what these individual goals are and what they mean to you. So obviously, if you have a soft tissue injury or a potential stress fracture that's developing, and you don't know which, and you take a day or two off, then if you go and you feel better, but then you go run 18 miles a few days later, and it really makes the thing worse, well, are you going to be more likely or less likely to finish that marathon on time? Are you going to be more likely or less likely to return to Ironman training immediately after the event, or returning to your, running 4 or 5 days a week immediately after the event? That's absurd, right? It's completely preposterous to think that you are going to be way better and way better off if you just do those runs. So if you think about that, it makes it a little simpler. So, you have to remember your brain's telling you when you shouldn't run because it hurts. And so then you think, what is your goal? Why are you trying to do this? Why are you trying to obsess on finishing these few workouts? Is it because you have a fear of not finishing, of walking, that embarrassment that we talked about? Or is your goal to just finish and get the t-shirt? So once you know which of those things is actually your case, then it makes it a lot easier for you to make a decision about what you should really do or should not do in terms of these other runs. But one of the things I tell runners all the time is that, if your goal is to actually do a race and you potentially have a metatarsal stress fracture, well, it's better to let it calm down and heal. But you have to decide what's most important to you. It's not my job as a doctor to ever tell an athlete they should or should not run. My job as an athlete is to say, if you run, these are the possible scenarios. If you want to run and there's a risk of a bad thing happening, like making a metatarsal stress fracture worse, you can do these things to reduce that risk, but it doesn't remove that risk. You have to decide how much risk you can tolerate. So if your goal is really to finish the marathon in under 4 hours, even if you've never done that before, you've never run under 4 hours, and you want to say that you did run under 4 hours in your marathon, when you actually had decreased fitness, because that's sort of like this additional feather in your cap, then you think about, running versus not running, right? So again, forget about the injury risk. Think about the probability of actually achieving your goal. And if you run and you make a stress fracture worse, it's definitely going to be more difficult to run under 4 hours. So if you have this weird new asymmetric pain, you only have it in one foot, you only have it in one leg, you only have it in one place, you have pinpoint tenderness, you can actually push on it and reproduce the symptoms, and it hurts, and you know that it hurts there, then that is not a good thing. If you've never had this pain before and you've been running for many, many years, that is unusual and it's ominous. It's not a good sign. So you have to assume at that point that it's something bad, that it either is a significant tendonitis issue or a stress fracture that's brewing or something that you should take really seriously. But all of those things, something that's unusual, that has pinpoint tenderness, all of those things really do help you determine that it's not a good sign, and you have to protect it, right? So if you're in the last 10 days, the truth is you are not going to build up any significant increase in your aerobic fitness in the next 10 days, even if you run every day. You're going to do a lot of tissue damage, This is why there is a taper, right? You're supposed to taper right before your race because you're supposed to recover from all of this tissue damage and let things rebuild and become stronger so that you can run your race faster. That's the main point of a taper. So you do not want to just ignore one of these problems right at the end of your race and like keep, for these sort of mental security of having done some final race preparation. You have to figure out whether or not that preparation is good for you or bad for you. That's the bottom line. And that's what we do though as athletes, is we always think if we can just train more, we'll be better off. And that is not always the case. And so when you're a few days out, you think, will it help my aerobic fitness? Well, no, that's a given. If you only have literally like 4 more days of potential workouts before your marathon and you're not going to increase your aerobic fitness, are you going to increase your actual strength? Well, the argument many people would say, well, probably if I haven't run 18 miles yet, but I can just jam in an 18-mile workout, then I'll be stronger. I would argue that you're going to get a lot of tissue damage running 18 miles and that it can help you psychologically. But if you're already injured, it's not the worst. It's not worth the risk of potentially worsening that injury in a way that's going to make you more likely that you'll fail at achieving your goal during the actual event. So those are really key considerations when you're trying to figure out whether or not you should do those last few workouts. So you're not going to get increased aerobic fitness. You're not really going to develop better form. You're not going to get much stronger physically. You're potentially going to get a lot weaker. So in Amy's case, I would say that you are not going to be well served by jamming in a 10-mile run today and then an 18-mile run on Saturday and then 2 or 3 runs the week of the marathon, because you have something brewing. There's a problem. And yes, it would be better if you would just go see a doctor, get completely diagnosed and all that. Of course, there's the real risk that when you go into the doctor is going to say you're completely nuts and you should not run the race at all. But that's none of the doctor's business. It's your job to go there, listen to the doctor, and then take that advice and decide whether or not you're willing to tolerate the risk that the doctor is telling you you're going to go through if you do the event without being properly diagnosed and then knowing what the real problem is. Because again, if you don't know it's a soft tissue problem, you don't know if it's a bone problem, you don't know if it's a stress fracture, if you don't really know what it is, you can't really make that call on assessing risk. But at a base level, we know that most runners who want to do a marathon have been training for many, many months. It's very, very difficult for them to let go and just skip the event right when it's race time. That is a really hard pill for most runners to swallow. So you have to really think about it. Now, we've created a quiz and a thing that can actually help you process some of this and help you figure out whether or not you should do those final runs right before your marathon. So if you want to do that quiz, you can just go to pre-marathon pain quiz at docontherun.com. You can get it, it's free, you can go through it, and it'll help you determine whether or not it's a good idea for you to continue to jam in workouts or not. And with each of those, depending upon your answers, we'll give you a couple of different videos that'll help you understand really what the key considerations are. So you have to be thoughtful about this. And again, we always talk about risk because that's what we as physicians do. We assume you just want to be healthy and you want to be strong and you want to be fit and you don't want to make anything worse. But just like in Amy's case, many times we know that when it's time for you to show up for the race, you want to be there psychologically and physically prepared as much as possible. But that's the thing. You have to really figure out what's most important to you and what you really want to do after the race. So if you just want to finish, then you can probably run and you have less risk. But if you have another event afterward, like ramping up for another marathon or an Ironman race or something like that, then you have to take this very, very seriously. So even if you're just thinking of this as a training run, you do not want to go do an 18-mile run as a training run when you're already having something that's sore and injured. Your coach would probably tell you to shift gears and do something different that day. But all that seems to go out the window when we're right in final race preparation. And people want to finish like a few workouts. They want to add them on. They want to keep going. And they think it's going to make them better. But you only want to do the things that are going to make you stronger. Don't ever do the things that you know will make you weaker. That is a recipe for a disaster, not a recipe for success.
Doc on the Run. We help injured runners run.